Welcome to the Executive Coach podcast. And if you've ever considered reducing your family screen time, or you've just thought to yourself every now and then, it would be lovely to press reset on some of those habits, shift some of the family dynamic around that. Or if you find yourself saying things like you need to get away on holiday to have that pure, uninterrupted, unstructured family time together, which we all know is so important and we know that our kids love, then this is the episode for you. I'm going to be talking you through our screen-free experiment this January. And it was a version of screen-free that worked for us. I will talk about how we set that up for success, what drove the decision, and then perhaps that will give you some ideas of how you could create a version that would be applicable to you and your family if this is something of interest. I'm also going to talk you through some of the benefits and unexpected outcomes and challenges. They're not the ones necessarily that I predicted, but they have been plenty of really cool outcomes, and it's certainly been a game changer for us this January. So I look forward to getting into this inside this episode. Let's dive in. This is the Executive Coach podcast with me, Maya Goodker, where I help you tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, successful, and aligned with who you truly are. Having worked with hundreds of leaders, I know that when we're properly supported and with great prioritization and planning, we really can have it all with ease. So let's stop the overwork and dive in. So starting with the why, we have been relatively intentional with our screens. So the TV is in our loft, so it's not part of the daily living spaces. The kids don't have their own devices. They have a shared family iPad, which periodically in the holidays, we just lose it, as in we just hide it somewhere and forget where it is. But during term time, it does need to be around because they need it for things like homework. But I have noticed that then creeps into them using it for games and things like that. And then when it comes to the previous rhythms that we had prior to the experiment, we were mainly doing TV on a Friday evening and after 4 p.m. on the weekends and on like holidays and things like that. So kids have had some pretty good boundaries in place and they respond really well to those. So it might have been fine if they were then going to have an hour or two on the screens, but that was just creeping up, and it was coming at a time of day where we were also tired, or a time of the week where we were also tired in the evenings or a Friday. So we weren't necessarily policing it very well. And so I was just aware that there was probably something there that needed a bit of a reset. I follow Cal Newport, so I love the idea of not necessarily restricting and reducing screen time, but actually crowding it out with other fun activities. I guess just to caveat before we dive in that I am not anti-screen. I'm aware of the personalities and the behaviors in our own house. I know what I'm like. I know what my kids are like. And so this is very much things that I was noticing for us where it was becoming addictive for them. They would say things like, when we get home from this busy day or whatever, we're going to get TV and things like that. And it's the beauty of an experiment. Just wanted to see what would happen if we mix that up a bit. How we set it up for success. The first thing, as I said, is wanted to do this really gently and really wanted them to agree to it. So wanted them to feel like they had some control over what was happening, and that I knew that if that could happen, then they were going to be a lot more bought into the whole thing. So my husband disconnected the internet from that main TV in the loft, which means that there's still, I think, Freeview on there. But let's be honest, the kids have no interest in that. As far as they're concerned, that TV is now dead to them without access to the iPlayer, Netflix, and Disney Plus. So obviously that is that principle of whenever we are trying to reduce something that is addicting or tempting, to have it out of sight, out of mind, and the brain then does not have that awful thing where they know that something's available to them but they can't have it. That's so much more difficult. The kids already, like I said, I've seen their behavior when it comes to boundaries. So if they know it is a non-negotiable hard no that they are having no screens, their behavior, they almost lighten up and relax. They're like, oh, okay, I'm almost free of that. And now I'm going to find an actual way to occupy myself or relax. And I've seen that in them before this experiment. So I wanted to build on that a little bit. And the main thing was not doing the TV stuff. For them also, screens like using the iPad and things like that have been massively reduced. In my case, I have joined in with them on the TV front. My husband doesn't watch much TV in January anyway, and I personally have tried to be more mindful with my own screen use, but I would say that I think there's a little bit more work I could do on that front. When it came to getting their buy-in, the kids' buy-in, I asked my daughter what would make this challenge worthwhile, and she picked out this super long trampoline for the garden for her gymnastics, and you could argue that's basically bribery. What I would say is that for kids of that age, we as parents are effectively their frontal lobe. We are that self-regulation. And when anybody is offered a free dopamine bath of screen streaming versus a more difficult form of dopamine, they're obviously going to go for the easier option. It's a survival mechanism. And so having a reward like this, I think at the outset was a really useful thing. And then it's been easy to point out so many of the benefits along the way. So I think their intrinsic motivation has built throughout this month as they've actually felt more relaxed. They've felt more spacious, more creative, and they've seen some of the benefits. I also just set the expectations with them about dopamine and how in the first couple of weeks they might find this harder. I wanted them to know that the first few weeks would feel hard so that they weren't like shocked by the process. As it turns out, they have been completely fine. I think going back to that boundaries thing, it's often the gray area where they think it's a possibility that's actually harder for them. Knowing that it's been completely off the table has been really easy for them. But don't just take it from me. My son has actually just walked in the room, so I'm thinking we can do a quick cheeky interview with him. So hello.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask you how you found the screen-free experiment so far.
I liked it, and I've loved playing more family games. But sometimes I get bored, and I find new things to do.
Okay, what kind of new things do you find to do?
I made a bird feeder, and I also found that if you get a toothpick and make faces with dots on a banana, it's actually really fun.
Oh yeah, we had all these decorated bananas. Is there anything that you found particularly hard about this experiment?
Sometimes I've gotten TV cravings, but then I just lie on the floor and stare into the wall.
I've got one more question for you actually. What were your thoughts before we started the experiment?
I was really worried, but then I found it was actually quite easy.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining in on the podcast today. I think I've scared him off. I think that was him running away. Let's get back to the episode. I guess that's another reason why I think this is the perfect age, because they're that little bit more mature, little bit more self-sufficient. And so I could see the opportunity. They're already doing things like my son will do his and my daughter's laundry of like sports clothes and things. They can make a dinner, they can bake. This is not them in particular, but this is what kids their age are capable of doing. And so it just feels like this is the time when it's going to be easier for us to do it. Of course, that also means that we have been available for the game of cards or like shooting hoops outside. I've had to police a few more fights between them because they're playing more games together, physical games, board games. And I know that a few years ago, if you'd asked me to do this, I would have said, no, it's just not possible. Not when I'm doing a master's on top of work and all of the things. It just feels a little bit more possible now at their current ages. Okay, so in terms of what we've noticed so far, the first thing I want to say, and I cannot understate this, I feel like we have lifted a numbing cloak or a dumbing down cloak off my kids. Kids are absolute genius, in my opinion. And this is all kids. They are creative, they're resourceful, they're fun, they're sparky, they're funny. They ask incredible questions that, you know, make you stop and think and that you don't always have an answer for. And I feel that we are now being able to experience that with the kids. It's certainly something that I had glimpses of before, which probably also inspired the experiment, but it is so abundantly clear when you're doing this for weeks on end. And I think it has shocked me how much that boundaried use of screen was still having that effect. So it's not about the fact that they have a normal day and then on certain days they have that screen time. It's the knowing that that thing exists as an option for them in the house, and knowing that that is going to signify some sort of a end part of their day on particular days of the week. It's knowing that that thing is even there as a possibility almost just dulled everything else down. They're making more stuff, whether that's art or wanting to make a bird feeder or cooking. We've got all of these lovely Usborne books in the house, all of those beautifully illustrated Usborne books, and I just never feel like the kids got properly into those. But now they will join me on the sofa with a book and they will pull out one of those because those are what are downstairs, and those things are so much more interesting to them because they're not being compared to the lure of that free dopamine bath. Everything looks more attractive when that easy rush is not an option. Things are in brighter, bolder color. Everything's more interesting to them. The funny thing is that it's actually been more challenging for me because I think in a January, I probably would have done a bit of numbing out with the TV in the evenings, and not having that has had some interesting outcomes for me. So actually, it made me do a lot more rumination initially. Cal Newport talks about the fact that screens can often distract us just enough so that we don't address some of our needs as human beings for, could be social interaction and connection. And I think it was related to this that I found myself in this rumination loop. Without that distraction, without that numbing out, I became aware of a couple of issues, and I found myself in that sort of really endless loop rumination cycle that felt not great. And eventually, having met a friend and had a really good heart-to-heart about it, it has been a constructive thing, but in the moment it felt hard. And so actually part of this process has probably been more challenging for me, even though it's been very good, than it might have been for my kids. So to wrap up, what I would say is that the emphasis has been on making it feel like something positive and adding more things in, more games, more fun, rather than something restrictive. If you do want some more ideas of activities that are low bar, don't require too much effort, I'll include a link to my Substack in the show notes, and we've got 20 plus screen-free activities there. And my emphasis there was nothing that was too onerous. Like, I didn't need it to be the grand gesture, the big outing, the thing requiring specific weather conditions or the holidays. I'm looking for those small things we can do even when we're tired or in an evening after a busy day. Those things that feel accessible, often they're just part of daily life. Just starting to build some of these activities in, whether you're planning to go cold turkey or not, can be really useful. Some of these activities we were already doing, and I was already noticing that they were great additions to family life. And so then they were there and available to us when we did this experiment. Others have emerged during this process. So maybe it can be useful for you to have a look at somebody else's list and then make a version that feels right for you, or take some specific examples. So that list is available in the show notes. And, you know, what I would say is if you're considering something similar, drop a seed of an idea to the family, see what the reaction is, and do it super gently. If you think there's somebody that could really benefit from hearing this, whether they are struggling with their screen use or they're just really into this stuff, or they're aware of the impact on their family of screen use, or they're struggling for that unstructured time, that special family time. It can be a 10-minute card game. It can be a 15-minute family hoop shooting activity outside. It can be the kids clubbing together and actually making their dinner and feeling really satisfied about that. So let me know your thoughts on this episode. Drop me a note on LinkedIn or send me an email at info@mayagoodka.com. I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye bye.